This section is called Allowable Acquisition Cost Acquisition. So another well-named chapter, because this is plain English. What we're talking about here is the amount of money you would spend that would be logical or allowable to acquire a customer or a consumer. So we were just talking about the lifetime value of a consumer. You might be able to calculate that and get a pretty good idea of how much of a consumer is worth to you over the lifetime of that consumer's relationship with your company. For example, if they subscribe to your lemonade stand for a number of years, I think I came up with some sort of a cost of that consumer is drinking a lot of lemonade and they are worth that much revenue to you. So how much would you logically spend to acquire that consumer? By acquire, you're trying to, attract them. You're gonna advertise to them or holler at them and stand outside their house or whatever you're doing to acquire them. The allowable amount that makes sense, that would keep you profitable, you'd have to consider a few things. You would consider, and I'm putting a subtraction sign here, sort of the overhead per customer. So you have to pay your permits, you have to pay for your lemonade shop, whatever else you're paying for. You divide that up among your number of customers and you get some sort of a value. I don't know, no idea what that's going to cost you, but let's say it's $200 per customer. Now, taking that away from the revenue, this is a cost that's built into it. You know you have to spend that. You really should only be spending about, $1,000 to acquire that consumer. But there's more if you think about it. You obviously have to buy lemons and water and do whatever else you got to do that's your value delivery costs. And those might be some sort of a thing per consumer. I'll make up another number, let's call it 400. Now, realistically, you shouldn't spend much more than $600 to acquire this consumer. And actually, if you think about it, if you did actually spend $600, you're gonna break even. So you probably wanna make some sort of a profit in here. Figure what that might be. Maybe it's 30% you're trying to make, 30% is $180. And so therefore you should only spend about $420 as your allowable acquisition cost. So you do this math essentially between how much the consumer is worth to you over the lifetime, what you're going to be spending on that consumer on overhead, variable costs, what you want to actually profit from, and that will mathematically help you arrive at your allowable acquisition cost. And the only other thing I wanted to mention in this chapter that's kind of interesting is, if this can stay on the screen, the idea of a loss leader. And there are a lot of examples where you initially spend a lot more to acquire a consumer than what they do in their first purchase. So that first little bit of lemonade might be, only a $10 spend. And you might go and actually spend a lot more money to acquire that consumer. And you're sort of in the negative initially getting that consumer. But once they've tasted your lemonade and you've locked them into that subscription, eventually they're going to spend enough money with you, and this lifetime value is going to become large enough to justify that initial large spend. So the loss leader is a term you'll hear to describe an initial spend that's really large that isn't justifiable with the initial purchase, but eventually locks in a lifetime value that makes it worthwhile.